Here's your challenge. Forget the finish line. Imagine gliding through a forest trail or moving along a coastal road, not for the clock, but for the rhythm itself. What if every run felt like this? Like an adventure instead of a grind. I know what it's like when the spark fades, when the miles stop inspiring us, and even destination runs start to lose their magic. By the end of this video, you'll have a simple DopaMenu to make runs enjoyable again. A first step towards finding your running tribe, and one mindset shift that instantly eases pressure. Before I found these tools, running didn't always feel like the flow I wanted it to be. But now it's a different story. Have you ever headed out for a run, not because you were excited, but because you felt like skipping wasn't an option? That subtle shift from wanting to run to feeling like I had to was the beginning of my own slowdown. When I first started, running had been my release. Shoes on, pavement beneath me, thoughts unraveling into rhythm. It was simple, freeing, even joyful. But slowly over time, something began to change. Without really noticing, I began running less for the experience and more for the chase. Whether it was a faster pace, a longer distance, or the version of myself I thought a real runner should be. Instead of feeling lighter, I felt heavy under the weight of my own expectations. I remember one week when it really hit me. I pushed hard for 3 straight runs, hitting precise splits on the same route I'd done dozens of times. The results looked good on paper, but the runs blurred together into monotony. Each outing felt like checking off another box, instead of enjoying the time spent running. When a lingering pain forced me to miss a day, I wasn't relieved to rest. I was consumed by guilt, as though missing one session erased all of my previous effort. That was the moment I started noticing how easily a passion can twist into obligation. A hobby I once loved had begun to feel like work. I mean, sure, this is runwithryan.org, but it wasn't always so. And while we're on the topic, for tons more videos on running and for travel and adventure, for health and wellness, and even some style, I invite you to check out the Luxury of Adventure Premium Club. But here's the thing. I started out as a casual runner, just loving the sport, embracing the excitement of it while exploring my potential. But then starting the business aspect, well, that added an extra layer of pressure that would sometimes blur what each run was for. And that pressure wasn't only internal. Seeing posts on social media, friends logging further distances, racing faster, that only added another layer. It didn't matter that they were on different journeys. I'd scroll and sure, I'd wonder why I wasn't keeping up. Unfortunately, as inspiring as social media can be, I think we all can see and we all agree, there's a darker side to it as well. That kind of quiet comparison, well, it eats away at enjoyment. And in my case, it became another weight strapped on to every run. Looking into why this shift happens, I realized it wasn't just soreness or fatigue, it was how my brain was responding. Dopamine, the chemical that helps us feel rewarded. It's part of what makes running feel good in the first place. But when the runs become repetitive, or when every mile is measured, critiqued, and compared, that dopamine response, it dries up. Over-monitoring our pace and metrics can actually blunt the brain's reward systems, which explains why tracking progress so closely often left me feeling flat. What started as voluntary, energizing efforts turned into bland routine. My body and mind struggled to celebrate. That's when I discovered the idea of the fun and competence curve. In the beginning, running can feel awkward. Every step might feel a bit like work, but curiosity keeps us going. With consistency, things click. Endurance builds, competence grows, and the activity starts to feel effortless and fun. That's the sweet spot. But if we stack on too much too quickly, or slip into rigid expectation, we tip over the peak and land on the burnout slope, where running feels obligatory and draining. That's where I ended up. There's also a practical piece here. Enjoyment often comes from regularity. Many runners find that when they increase their frequency to 3 or 4 runs a week, building a gentle base, running itself starts to feel better, less of a struggle, and gives us more space to drop into flow. That's the runner's high we all love so much. Quick side note, if you've been struggling to feel that flow, we took a deep dive recently into the subject, discussing efficient ways to achieve flow. I'll link that video right up here in a card. So if we only lace up once a week, every run stays stuck in that awkward beginner's place, never easing us into comfort. That was part of my own problem. My volume and rhythms weren't aligned with what actually makes the sport rewarding. So the puzzle had two sides, my mindset and my mechanics. On one hand, I was letting outcomes define me. If the watch didn't show the numbers I wanted, the run felt like a waste of time. On the other hand, I wasn't giving myself the steady consistency or variation that supports long-term enjoyment. Combined, those flaws created the grind, stripping away the very things that fueled my earliest miles. But here's the good news. This spiral isn't permanent. Understanding these patterns showed me it wasn't running itself that had become the enemy. It was how I was framing it and how my brain was rewarding or failing to reward my effort. Once I realized that, I could start changing how I approached each run, reworking both the expectations I brought to them and the ways I sought out enjoyment. And that's where things got interesting, because the turning point wasn't chasing bigger goals or trying a new gadget. It was learning how the brain handles motivation and what levers I could adjust to light up those rewards again. That shift opened the door to rebuilding joy from the inside out. What changed everything for me was finally paying attention to how my brain was wired to respond to running. This is where the dopamine shift comes in. The idea that I didn't need more miles or better gear, but a smarter way to keep my brain engaged. Dopamine isn't about instant happiness or some magic fix. It simply helps our brains register novelty and small wins as rewarding. When every run looks the same, those little rewards can dry up quickly. And that's when running, for me, started to lose its spark. Looking back, I can see how routine drained the enjoyment. Same route, same pace, same tired mental checklist. Hit the number, finish the route. Over time, I trained myself to expect monotony instead of reward. No new input meant no fresh dopamine response. And instead of feeling energized at the end of a run, I'd often felt like I just repeated yesterday without the satisfaction. The demand to try harder wasn't the problem. How I was running was. So I tried something new. I built my DopaMenu. Runner's World suggests this exact strategy, creating a short list of personal pleasures we can mix into our runs. The principle is simple. Give our brains something to anticipate. For me, that looked like 3 easy swaps you could use right now too. First, I saved my favorite podcasts and audiobooks exclusively for running. Knowing a new chapter was waiting for me made me want to lace up. Second, once a week I picked a different route, even if it was just doing my usual route in reverse. And third, I promised myself a small post-run ritual. Sometimes a nice coffee, sometimes just a long, unhurried stretch I actually enjoyed moving through. These don't cost me anything, yet they give my brain fresh triggers to connect with effort. Music can be another small but powerful addition. For me, a DJ set packed with songs that carry momentum changed the feel of early mornings when my energy might be low. I wasn't chasing splits anymore. I was chasing the rhythm of songs I loved and wanted to move to. One particular morning drove the lesson home. I swapped my typical beach strand route on its head. Instead of running north into Malibu, I ran south from Santa Monica through the marina toward Manhattan Beach. Luxury problems, I know. Nothing about the run was especially fast, but the novelty in a direction switch lit something inside me. At the time, each bend felt unfamiliar, each view its own surprise, and instead of grinding through distance, I noticed I was smiling. Midway in, I think about 8 miles that day. I even stopped on the pier for a coffee, and then I turned around and ran home. That experience sums it up for me clearly. Different equals dopamine hit. And the best part? Different is free. What mattered wasn't the grandness of change, but the layering of small, intentional choices. A walk to run warm-up on a new surface. A route chosen for scenery rather than for speed. A podcast saved for the weekends. Each tweak sparked a small shift in how my brain processed the effort. Instead of waiting for some distant finish line payoff, I was earning micro-rewards along the way. It rewired running from a chore back into something playful, even something unexpected. And here's the thing. These changes don't demand a reinvention of our training. They're small enough to adapt without strain, but potent enough to flip the way runs feel. Once I experienced the lift from these tiny adjustments, I found myself not just running more consistently, but looking forward to it again. Runs felt lighter because they weren't bound to metrics. They were tied to curiosity, to mood, and to a menu of simple joys I had built for myself. Still, I realized variety alone wasn't the final answer. Shifting how my brain engaged with running made it feel enjoyable again. But something was still missing. A run could hold my focus, sure, but that sense of reward was amplified when those moments connected to something larger than myself. That opened a new door entirely. And it started with asking whether running really had to be something I had always done alone. Finding my running tribe changed more than my training. It changed how I felt about the sport. For a long time, I had convinced myself that running was meant to be solitary, a place to clear my head. But eventually, those solo miles started to feel quiet in the wrong ways. I realized that what I was missing wasn't discipline or mileage. It was connection. Taking the step to join a local running club can be more daunting than we expect. We can worry about pace, about not belonging, about maybe even slowing other people down. But here's what I've learned. The hardest barrier is just showing up. Most groups, as coaches and experienced runners emphasize, welcome newcomers of all levels. If you feel nervous, try picking a social run, usually advertised as an easy pace, and treat it like a recon mission. You're there on an undercover investigation. You're not there to prove anything. You're there to see if camaraderie exists. And often, the real highlight isn't the miles shared, but the conversations afterward. Grabbing coffee with the group, swapping stories, letting the run blur into something more human than just effort. That shift from isolation to shared experience, it can be subtle at first. A small word of encouragement on a hill. Someone laughing about a snack experiment gone wrong. The ritual of a post-run meetup. Gradually, it stops being about trying to keep up. To this day, I'm still mostly a solo runner, but do intentionally make an effort to run with friends every few days. This shifts the purpose of the run and offers a time to enjoy connection, to share experience, and even share some laughs. What can seem intimidating becomes grounding. Soon, a running group goes from strangers to being part of a circle of people who understand the draw of showing up again and again for yourselves, but also for each other. But connection doesn't always need to happen in person. Some weeks, schedules don't line up, or a local group isn't an option. That's where online communities can fill the gap. Apps like Strava, or even Facebook groups dedicated to running, add a different layer of accountability. My online journey? Well, it started when I first started running. These were the early days of Instagram, and my early days as a runner. I challenged myself to post my journey as it started. One post a day. Before I knew it, I had posted pictures running through New York Central Park, along the North Shore of Kauai, and even daily images capturing a run from Huntington Beach to Arizona, 300 miles across California in 10 days. It felt great to share these early runs and to accept the bursts of encouragement, one or two kudos, a brief comment from another runner. And it felt great to meet, even online meet, other runners who are also pushing themselves. Knowing others are out there, even virtually, can give solo runs a shadow of companionship. I have this memory from that run across California I mentioned. Maybe it was day 5, leaving Palm Springs. A few of us ended up running some miles together. We were gathered on a rocky hillside, trying to determine our route. We weren't pushing pace. We were weaving sand and rock, stepping over roots and weaving around cacti, even splashing in a shallow creek. In that moment, it struck me how laughter replaced the pressure of timing. At the end of that day, sure, we may have talked about the distance. It was just under 30 miles. But we talked more about our moments together, truly feeling like we were sharing an adventure. All of this shapes how I view running. Once it was solely a solitary grind, anchored in goals and self-judgment. Now, it's tied to people, to places, rhythms outside myself. A tribe, Whether it's a Saturday coffee group, a handful of Strava friends, or a dog pulling at the leash, can be the reason to start runs with anticipation instead of obligation. That sense of belonging opens a new door, and yet something else might start to stir. Let's even look beyond connection. What keeps me going isn't just who I run with, but where I let running take me. Could the answer to shaking off the grind really be as simple as changing the way we approach each run? I used to think variety meant a slight detour or two, but what I've learned is that mixing things up can completely shift how running feels. When I was stuck on the same route, every crack in the pavement became as familiar as the back of my hand. There's something about familiarity, but that comfort can also turn stale. Sometimes repetition can dull the experience until we barely notice our surroundings anymore. What once felt grounding can leave us feeling numb. Breaking that pattern starts small. One morning, I decided against my default route and drove to the mountains to hit a trail I had my eye on. For years, I found reasons not to do it, convinced it was too much extra effort, or I didn't have the time. But within minutes of running it, I knew I'd been wrong. Dirt underfoot, shifting light through the trees, and an unfamiliar bend at every few yards, it was exactly what I'd been missing. Instead of staring down a sidewalk I knew all too well, I found myself curious again, scanning ahead for what was around the next curve. For that hour, running was an exercise. It was exploration, and that lesson stuck. Variety doesn't mean running farther or training harder. It means using different levers to keep the brain engaged. Simple changes like one weekly trail run, alternating between roads and trails, or doing a destination run that ends at a cafe or a particular viewpoint can reignite our enjoyment. The point isn't novelty for its own sake, but the way novelty refreshes dopamine's reward pathway and makes running feel alive again. So each week, I began experimenting with a new formula, a new route day, a playful run, and one social or easy companion run. On the new route day, I'd swap sidewalks for trails, or carve through a part of the city I hadn't explored. The playful run could be anything from using the Zombies Run app, to inventing my own scavenger hunt, spot 3 murals, weave through a park, find a hill I'd never climbed before, or spot people who were demonstrating love. Seriously, I remember running along New York's West Coast Highway. That was my goal for the day. Spot people demonstrating love. Whatever that might look like. It all keeps it fun and fresh and keeps my mind and eyes staying curious. And the social run? That's where variety overlaps with connection. Meeting a friend or joining a group keeps the effort light, but the experience rich. Watch your workout structure too. It's another layer. Instead of falling into the comfort of steady pacing, try adding hill repeats, intervals, or a tempo section mid-run. Don't make anything too extreme, just different enough to pull us out of autopilot. Every shift can bring the same result, finishing while feeling more energized, as if variety itself is more restorative than rest. But variety isn't just about routes or structure. Sometimes it comes down to injecting small doses of playfulness into ordinary runs. I can't say when I first heard the term micro resets. Instead, they were just something I started to do naturally. When I'm out on the trails, I'll spread my arms like airplane wings barreling down a hill. I'll be that guy spontaneously yelling, "Woo!" while peeking over a tough climb. I'll even crack a grin mid-stride to shift my mood. These all sound silly, and they are, but that's the point. On days when I might otherwise spiral into self-pressure, these slow-stakes gestures can loosen grip and bring me back into the simple joy of being in motion. One of the clearest memories of this shift was a destination run I mapped through a part of town I'd never run in before. The streets wound through small diners and painted storefronts, and halfway through, I stumbled onto a weekend street fair. I stopped for a moment, sweaty and grinning, and just stood in the middle of it all. The run wasn't logging my fastest or my longest, but it stuck with me as one of the most rewarding. It was proof that variety opens doors we don't often realize exist when we're locked into routine. What starts as a nudge to change scenery turns into a habit of exploration. Each week it's something I could look forward to. A new trail, a gamified run, a small ritual with friends. The miles aren't just boxes to check anymore. They're small adventures waiting to be chosen. More than anything, variety gives running its spirit of discovery back. And yet, there's one more shift waiting beneath it all. Variety makes running lighter and more playful, but underneath, the pressure to measure ourselves against outcomes and expectations, they can still linger. The final piece isn't about where or how we run. It's about changing the meaning we attach to running itself. For me, the biggest turning point came when I stopped viewing running as a scoreboard and began seeing it as a place for growth. This mindset shift, running as growth, not as obligation, wasn't easy or instant, but it was the difference between exhaustion and renewal. For years, I'd let numbers dictate how I felt, chasing paces and distances as though they determined my worth. They didn't. They only locked me into a cycle of striving and disappointment. What finally set me free was changing the questions I was asking myself. Not, did I hit the goal? But, did this run give me something today? That reframing opened a door I hadn't noticed before. I realized my old habits made running feel like a test, one that I rarely passed day after day after day. It was relentless perfectionism. Set a goal, strive my hardest to achieve, then repeat. One of my first 100-mile races, it was 80-something miles in, during the depths of night, while running, or slowly slogging through the forest mountains with a friend, my pacer at the time. Well, I passed out. My race ended. For me, this was failure. I can still remember the drive from Colorado back to Los Angeles, how down and upset I was at myself. But looking back, that experience was the moment I began to understand the power of failure. If we learn from it, see what worked, what didn't, and we give ourselves a bit of grace, failure can teach us lessons success only wishes it could. This requires we create space for self-compassion and allow for experimentation. And the most practical way I found was to follow a simple 3-step checklist. First, challenge belief. I constantly ask myself, is this thought helping me or holding me back? For example, believing a run isn't worthwhile until it's at least a 5K, that doesn't serve me. Dropping that rule made shorter runs feel valid again. I dropped the guilt that I wasn't doing more. Second, swap out outcome goals for commitment goals. Instead of aiming to shave 20 seconds off a pace, commit to one easy run this week or 5 minutes of movement when motivation might be low. Third, actively coach ourselves with self-talk and with focus. Simple lines like, "You got this," or "Keep the rhythm steady," ease discomfort when the brain wants to spiral. Personally, these 3 steps ground me in action rather than judgment. A concrete exercise that helped anchor this shift was no watch running. Once a week, I'll leave my watch at home and just trust my body. At first, the lack of data gnawed at me, but over time, it became liberating. On one of those runs, I gave myself a new guide, the talk test. If I could speak in full sentences, I knew I was running easy enough. That check-in felt more humane than chasing an arbitrary number on a screen, and it taught me to gauge effort with more intuition. Now I look forward to those runs as my weekly reset. Just last week, I went out for a run, and I forgot my earbuds at home. No music? Should I even run? I did. It took some effort, but I challenged myself to be in the present moment. Let me say this, if I hadn't forgotten my earbuds, I would not have heard the rustle of palm trees, the ocean waves crashing against the shore, or the kids laughing in the park. It truly did become a special run. It was an unexpected reset, one where the joy of simply moving through time and space came flowing back. Heading out without our fitness watches, maybe without our earbuds, these changes teach us resilience. Letting go of all the extra gear and outcomes, leaning into the moment. If we give ourselves these moments, missed goals no longer crush us because they're not the point anymore. Even setbacks like illness, bad sleep, skipped weeks, they become part of the process rather than failures. Take sleep. Applying self-compassion reminds us it isn't indulgent, it's essential. Fatigue, irritability, and declining performance can all signal overtraining or low energy availability. If you notice these patterns consistently, it's worth pulling back and even consulting with a coach or a doctor. Protecting our recovery is part of growth, not a sign of weakness. Gradually, running will loosen its grip as an obligation. A mile becomes no less valuable than 3. A walk doesn't diminish a run. And rest days are part of the rhythm. What matters is consistency, curiosity, and kindness towards ourselves. Stop chasing proof through metrics and cultivate a relationship through movement. That change, less proof and more enjoyment of movement, for me, it rippled outward, reshaping not just my running, but how I handle pressure in other parts of my life. The truth is, this shift doesn't strip away goals. It redefines them. I still have races and dreams I look forward to, but they no longer determine if I've succeeded. Instead, they give me direction without holding my joy hostage. I am in control of my joy, just as you are of yours. Every run, no matter the distance or the effort, is an investment in well-being, not a test of adequacy. And that left me with a kind of clarity I hadn't known before. When running is rooted in growth instead of obligation, it sustains itself for the long term. It becomes less about proving we belong and more about showing up for ourselves. That perspective ties all the strands together, the novelty, the connections, the small adventures, and gives them meaning. It's how I learned to finally experience what running could fully offer. What follows from here isn't about bigger challenges or stricter routines. It's about embracing running in a way that is smarter, more compassionate, and far more rewarding than chasing numbers could ever be. So here's where it all comes together. Rediscovering the joy in running isn't a single breakthrough. It's built from small, intentional shifts that make each step lighter. A quick recap of the 3 you can start today. Build your own DopaMenu. Save your best podcast or coffee rituals just for runs. Find your tribe, join a group run, or connect through apps like Strava for virtual support. Try a mindset reset. Leave the watch at home and run by how you feel once a week. Pick one of these micro challenges and let me know in the comments down below which you're gonna try first. If you found this video helpful and want more practical running tips, if you enjoy travel and adventure, all things health and wellness, and even some style, I invite you to join the Luxury of Adventure Premium Club on runwithryan.org. All the videos, they get posted there first. Joining would be an incredible way to show your support. Please know I appreciate it and I am beyond grateful. Or please consider subscribing here on YouTube. You know what to do. Tap that button down below, give the video a like, and set a notification. It truly does help the channel out. Remember, at the end of the day, running isn't just about fitness. It's one of the simplest ways to explore new places and transform everyday miles into memorable experiences. Maybe that's your why, to explore new places. Or maybe it's for connection. Maybe you don't have a why. To find it, go ahead and check out this next video right here. Thanks again, my friends. Now let's get out there and try something new and unexpected while finding joy in the movement. I'll see you back here very soon.